Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our ranking member and to our witnesses. Thank you for being here today. I believe as I was coming in, Mr. Kupiak, I think I heard you talk a little bit about employment and price stability. Well, certainly as we know, the United States economy continues to recover. It's important for us to understand the Federal Reserve's dual mandate to achieve maximum employment and price stability, as well as to understand that Congress continues, of course, to have the oversight of the Feds, but to allow the Fed's monetary policy independence to achieve what I'm going to call these twin goals. So I'd like to discuss the Fed's role in bank supervision. I think the Federal Reserve's governor stated the most important contribution we can make to this global financial system is to ensure the stability of the United States financial system. So when we think of that, when we think of the $50 billion asset threshold, and I can go on record saying that I think it should be higher. And while if we talk about a $100 billion asset threshold might make more sense, I don't know that I agree with a threshold alone being enough to warrant how we treat the banks and how we label them. So without that, the question for the panel is, was Dodd-Frank's Section 165 enhanced supervision supposed to apply to firms that lack systemic importance to the stability of the United States financial system? And if not, what are those domestic effects on having regulators apply enhanced supervision to such institutions?
Thank you. The Section 165, if you read it, and I'm sure you have, it is about financial stability. The enhanced prudential standards are standards that are supposed to be imposed because the firms they're imposed on, if they were to get into financial distress, could cause a crisis. They could cause financial markets to lock up, to dysfunction. And so the whole idea that a $50 billion institution could bring the U.S. financial markets to its knees, I think, is crazy. The $50 billion threshold is way too low. Last week, I testified in Chairman Neubauer's committee, the Committee on Financial Institutions, on a more appropriate way to designate institutions, and this is going back to the modification of Congressman Luke DeMeyer and his colleagues' bill, where the FSOC would consider designations. But other than to differ from Congressman Luke DeMeyer's bill, the whole financial systemic risk debate has moved to designating subsidiaries as critical for the financial system. So if you look at the resolution policies that we now are being promoted internationally and domestically by the FDIC, they say what you really have to do to maintain financial stability is if a firm gets into trouble, you have to keep the subsidiaries open and operating to prevent financial systemic risk. And so what I would argue is you would look at the subsidiaries and designate subsidiaries as being the systemically important subsidiaries, and that would take away the whole threshold. So you could be a large firm, but you could be well diversified and have a number of small subsidiaries, and none of them might be critical for the function of the financial market. So I think it really is the way the resolution ideas are moving, and it would mandate legislative changes to Section 165 of the Dodd-Frank Act and how we designated firms.
Okay, in my last few seconds, as certainly you know, by law, the Federal Reserve conducts monetary policy to achieve maximum employment, to stable prices, and moderate long-term interest rates. Dr. Rivlin, would you please discuss, to the best of your knowledge, what effects the federal monetary policy has, if any, on employment and perhaps through sustained low interest rates or on wage growth?
Well, the Fed has a couple of ways, several ways of affecting the level of activity in the economy. The most obvious one is control of short-term interest rates, and in an economy that's operating below its potential, and recently we've been way below our potential, it can stimulate some investment and activity by keeping rates low. During the recent years, they also realized they needed to keep long-term rates low, and that was the reason for the bond buying and the quantitative easing. These are fairly blunt instruments, but they use them as well as they can, and I think by and large they're doing a pretty good job.
Gentlelady's time has expired.